Good evening, all of you. I guess I'm audible to all of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. I'll just wait one more minute and then we will start off. Currently, I can see only a few of you are there. I'll just wait one more minute. I can see 5 people are there, only 5 of you have joined. I'll just wait one more minute and then we will start off. Now, welcome to the first session of the EGAE. Your course code is 182. And for this particular course code, there are 3 different modules. All of you are pretty aware of it. Module 1 is all about, it deals with the process of communication. We will be discussing about the process of communication in detail. We would be talking about how communication has globalized the entire world, and we are going to discuss about the different aspects of verbal as well as non-verbal communication. That is the content of your module 1. Now, coming to the content of your module 2, or what we call it as block 2, it is about informal interpersonal functions. We would be talking about, in this particular block, we would be talking about making inquiries and asking questions. We would be discussing about the different forms of oral communication. We will be discussing in detail about group discussions, about meetings. We would be talking about the presentation skills, because nowadays, like discussions, meetings, presentations, these have become the part and parcel of everyday's organization, for both for as well as for organizational purpose, also as well as also for your personal life. It is something that is very important, right? That is the getting acquainted with the different forms of communication, getting acquainted with the different written, to be more specific, with the written as well as with the oral forms of communication. So we would be discussing in detail about the written as well as the oral forms of communication. Coming to your block 3, we would be talking about, there are 4 different skills that are there, which are the very basics of communication. Can you all point out what are the 4 different skills that are there in communication? Any idea what are the 4 different skills that we have in communication, without which we cannot communicate? Without those skills, it would be very difficult to communicate. Can you point out what are those 4 basic skills that are required for us to communicate? Yes? What are the 4 basic skills that are required for all of us to communicate? Yes? Any idea? Any idea?
Maybe reading, writing, listening.
Absolutely, they are called as LSRW skills, what is called as listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So, these four skills, that is listening, speaking, reading, and writing, basically, it's an amalgamation of the four skills that is what makes up the complete process of communication. Without these four skills, we are not able to communicate. Whenever we communicate without these four skills, it becomes very difficult for all of us to communicate unless and until these four skills, that is listening, speaking, reading, and writing, are inculcated in us. We find it very difficult to communicate, right? So basically it's the amalgamation of all these four skills that we will be talking about in block 3. Now, starting with, we are actually for today's session, as well as there is one more session. Within these two sessions, I'll be covering up all the three like blocks, whatever you all have for this particular paper. Now, coming back to block 1, which is understanding of communication. Now, first of all, just tell me what you'll understand by this process of communication. What is communication, or what you'll understand by this term communication? And if you could point out very briefly that why is it that it is called a process? Okay, it is communication is called as a process. Why is it so that it is called as a process? Any idea? First of all, point out what you'll understand by the term communication. What is communication? Yes?
Communication can be exchange of ideas, thoughts, and maybe discussion between two or more people, and what should I say? It's a ongoing process as it needs more than one person.
Absolutely correct. Whatever Digonto has said, that's absolutely correct. Anybody else would like to add more on to this? Yes? Yes?
Communication means to
Ma'am,
exchange your ideas, your feelings, and everything to the another person by writing, by speaking, by body language. There are different means.
Absolutely correct. Yes. Absolutely
interacting with
correct.
interacting with peoples in different formats,
Okay.
Yes.
maybe virtual or live.
Okay. Right. Now, absolutely, whatever y'all have said, three of you have just three of you spoke. Whatever y'all said, it's absolutely correct. There's no doubt about it. That communication is we can say that it's a transfer of information. Whenever we want to exchange our thoughts, our views, our opinions, our feelings, we do it in, like, we communicate or we express ourselves through using proper words. There's exchange of words between two, or it might be one is to, not necessarily that always that there are two people involved in this process. It might be more than two also, because right now when I am conducting this particular session, I don't have one listener. I have a number of people, okay, listening to me. So it is at one end we have the speaker, and at the other end, what do we have? We have the listeners, or whom we call it as the audience. So it is a transfer of information. It might be in the form of information, it might be in the form of thoughts, feelings, ideas, where at one end there is a speaker who is also called as the encoder. Now, the speaker is
Yes.
also called as encoder. At one end, there is a speaker, at the other end, there is one listener, or there might be a number of listeners, or whom we call as the decoder. So speaker at one end, we have the speaker who is called as the encoder. At the other end, we we have the listener, whom we call it as the decoder, right? Now, whenever the speaker has a message which he or she wants to share or wants to deliver the message, he or she puts it into proper words. He or she, whatever thoughts he or she frames it into proper sentences, right? Now that is what is called as the encoding of the message that is to be delivered. And finally, when he delivers the message, right now I am delivering the like whatever information I am sharing with you all, that is becoming the message, or that is becoming the content. Okay, what the information that I am sharing with all of you, right? So that becomes the message. The message, it has to pass through a proper channel or a proper medium in order to reach the receiver or the decoder who is at the other end. So the receiver or the decoder, it meant the message reaches the receiver or the decoder who is at the other end through this channel or medium, right? So now this Google Meet, this particular platform which I'm using in order to conduct this particular session, now that becomes my medium, right? That becomes my channel of delivering my message to all of you, right? And since you all are listening to me right now, so you all are the receivers or the decoders, right? Now, after decoding this particular piece of information, after getting this particular piece of information, what the decoder does is decoder decodes the information, that is understand the information. It is not only about receiving the information, but at the same time also the information that has been delivered, the understanding of the information, which takes place how? Through this process of listening, right? Now, since people, you all are listening to me right now, listening, not hearing. The word is listening. So, what you are trying to do, the ultimate objective of listening is understanding. That is the only purpose, right? So, after listening, what do you all do? You give a feedback. Whatsoever the medium of communication it is right now, it is speaking. But even as in the case of written communication, also, we do give feedback. The receiver gives feedback back to the speaker. Now, this entire process of this 7 elements, right? We have 7 different elements, starting with the encoder or the sender, sending like encoding the message. Encoding becomes the second element. The third element itself is the message, right? The fourth element is the channel through which the message is delivered. The fifth element is the decoder or the receiver at the other end. The sixth element is when he or she decodes, that is the sixth element, and the last element is the feedback. This entire process goes on and on. In any process of communication, be it oral communication, be it written communication, this is the process which goes on and on. And just as like we breathe in and out in order to keep ourselves alive, so similarly, we do communicate in order to express ourselves. Expression, right? It is absolutely essential to express ourselves in order to make ourselves understood to the person who is at the other end, or maybe to the group of people who is at the other end. Now, this is the reason why communication has been described as the two-way process. It is not one way, but it is two-way, right? And this process is continuous. Okay, it goes on and on. The process is never ending, right? Now, the process of communication is never ending. Now, coming to Now, this is what is called as the process of communication, where it is not only the speaker who plays a very important role, but at the same time, the listener is equally important. Definitely, the speaker plays a very vital role in order to make himself or herself understood to the listener at the other end. And it is not only the speaker, but speaker plays a vital role, and at the same time it is also the listener who decodes the message and ultimately provides a feedback back to the sender who is at the other end. And this is how the process gets completed, right? Now, this is how the process gets completed. Now, in this process, right, at times, like imagine a situation when you are communicating to your friend over phone, right? And sometimes or the other you say, Please repeat again, I could not hear you properly." Now, in this process of communication, we we have to overcome a number of obstacles or a number of barriers. Now, this process of communication is also not without barriers. There are frequently we find that there are a number of interruptions that are there in this process of communication, which is also described as the barriers in the process of communication. Now, we can classify barriers under four different heads. Right. Now, what are the four different heads under which we can classify the barriers? One, it can be a physical barrier. Now, physical barrier, again, it can be in the form of noise. Now, if there is too much of noise in the background or in the environment, then it becomes very difficult for the listener to understand the content of speaker's words. So, noise in the background can cause a barrier in the process of communication. Did somebody raise his or her hand? Yes. Did somebody raise his or her hand? Anikesh. Yes, Anikesh. Yes, Anikesh. Do you have anything to say, Anikesh? I guess, am I audible? I hope I'm perfectly audible to all of you, right? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Now, as we were talking about the barriers, as I said, that noise is a form of physical barrier in the process of communication. Apart from noise, there are also a few other barriers also that are there in the process of communication. Like under the physical barriers, it can be not only noise, it can be, we can say that too much of information. When we receive too much of information, that can also cause a kind of barrier. Now, sometimes it is too much of information than we are able to take in. So that is also a kind of physical barrier. Apart from them, like the noise and too much of information, huge distance between the speaker as well as the listener, that is also considered as a barrier, because it is due to the presence of huge distance between the speaker as well as the listener that also causes a barrier. Because in most cases, unless and until a proper channel or a proper medium is used, the listener finds it very difficult to follow what the speaker has said. because the distance between the speaker and the listener might be huge. So that might be also an example of physical barrier. Apart from this, we also have what we call it as a semantic barrier, or what we call it as a language barrier. Now, very commonly we face this as in the case of communication, that language becomes a barrier. You are spoken to in a language which you do not understand. Now, that becomes a barrier definitely in the process of communication. Apart from that, sometimes the usage of homophones, okay, also causes a kind of barrier in the process of communication. Homophones are words having similar sound, but there is a difference in spelling as well as a difference in meaning, right? Sometimes homophones do cause a barrier in the process of communication. Apart from that, like there are certain words, okay, which the words which are the meaning of certain words varies from one person to that of the other person. If I say that the weather is extremely humid today, or if I say take up the example of this, like the price of washing machine is very high. Now the word high, it might have different connotations for different people. What might be high for me, it might not be high for somebody else. So usage of these kind of terms that do cause barrier in the process of communication. So this comes under what we call it as semantics or language barrier. Apart from that, the usage of different signs and symbols also do causes a barrier in the process of communication, right? Different kinds of signs and symbols that are being used, okay, in the process of communication, that too causes a barrier, right? Now, coming to the third type of barrier is what is called as psychological barrier. Now, psychological barrier can be faced by both the speaker as well as the listener. Say, for example, you are listening to a person. Egotism can be one of the psychological barriers. There are a number of psychological barriers. I'll take up 2-3 examples. Like egotism is considered as a psychological barrier. For example, you are communicating, right? You are communicating with a person is speaking to you, and for some reason or the other, previously you have had some kind of like heated up argument with that person. For some reason or other, you do not like the person at all. In such a case, accepting his or her views might hurt your ego, or your then like it might hurt your sentiments, right, in accepting his views. So this is what is called as egotism, which is a kind of psychological barrier. Apart from that, the listener might be disturbed for some reason or the other, right? So this disturbed mind, right, can also be a barrier in the process of communication, because it is due to the disturbed mind that he or she is not able to hear, like concentrate on the speaker's words. So that could be also an example of what is called as a psychological barrier, right? Apart from that, selective perception, right? This is also a kind of what is called as a psychological barrier. That is, most of us as listeners, we have a habit of picking and choosing things. Now that is also an example of what is called as a psychological barrier. Now we try to say, so for example, the speaker speaks for a span of say 1 hour. Out of that 1 hour's content, we might find only first 30 minutes of his content as really, like, we feel that it is important. As a listener, I feel that okay, this first half of the speech is important and not the later half, right? So in such a case, I'm being selective about picking up the content. Okay, I am in the habit of selectively perceiving things. So this is what is called as selective perception. Okay, so that is another barrier, because you are not listening to the entire message. As a listener, you are selectively picking and choosing things. So this is also an example of what is called as a psychological barrier, because it is ultimately the listener's psychology that affects his receiving of information. Okay, so these are sometimes closed mind. Okay, can also be an example of what is called as a psychological barrier. Sometimes like you must have like all of you must have noted, like while communicating with elderly people at home, they're not willing to accept anything that is new. They do not very willingly they do accept it. They have got a closed mind. They know that whatever they know, that is absolutely like that's they are absolutely fine with it. They do not want any kind of changes, right? So they don't accept anything new. Poshali, you want to say something? Poshali, you have raised your hand. Poshali?
Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. Yes, tell me,
Hi,
Poshali.
ma'am. Yeah, good afternoon. So I just had a clarification. Sorry to interrupt you in between. So I enrolled myself last year, and after that I did not get any enrollment number, and suddenly I got this class invitation today. So I just wanted to clarify, like, is this the first class going on?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so ma'am, sure. When will I receive my enrollment ID and every details?
I will not be able to, Poshali. I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but I'll not be able to provide you. You have to get in touch with the center, regional center. You have enrolled in 2801.
Okay.
Is that your center code? Is it 2801?
Yeah, I have to check because last year and then I have tried contacting the center, but due to lockdown, I think I was unable to reach them. So I mean, do you have any direct number where I can? I mean, if you can help me with the number.
Look, I will not be able to share it with you on a virtual platform like this, but I guess you should get in touch. I believe that at some point of time on the other, like concerned people are there in the center. So if you can call them up on the landline number, I guess you must be having the landline number. So you can get in touch with them. Like as soon as this period of crisis is over, maybe in another 15 to 20 days, you can directly get in contact with them.
Okay.
Okay,
So
Paushali?
okay. So this is the first class, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Ma'am,
So,
sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Once again, I'm Anikesh. So
yes,
I actually
Anikesh.
raised my hand that time. Actually, I was not accustomed to Google Meet, so it went by mistake, ma'am. So please pardon me.
Okay, absolutely fine. Not a issue. I thought so that either you're not able to unmute yourself or something like that. It's absolutely fine. Don't be sorry. It's absolutely fine. Now,
Okay,
whatever
thank you,
I
ma'am.
said so far, is it all clear to all of you? Any doubts, any queries relating to whatever I have said so far? Yes?
No, ma'am.
Right now we are talking about the barriers that are there in the communication process. Okay, that is what we are currently discussing. I spoke to you why communication is a process, what are the different elements that are there in the process of communication, and right now we are talking about the barriers that are there in the communication process. We had discussed about the physical barriers. I have talked to you all about the semantic barriers. Right now I am talking to you all about the psychological barriers. I am like see it like all the three different blocks that is there for your paper 182. It is difficult to cover it up in two sessions, but still I'm trying my level best. What I would suggest all of you is after today's session is over, please go through. I guess all of you are having the course content with all of you. Just even if you do not have, you can directly download it from the IGNOU website. You can get the full the details of all the course content that is there for this particular paper. You can directly download it. You can go through the content, and if you face any kind of problem in the next class also, we can quickly like I can just very briefly I can speak to you all about it, but provided you all go through it. Okay, that case you'll find it very helpful. Right. Now I am trying to cover as much as possible as today, because I will be again having another one more session with you all, that is on next Saturday within the same stipulated time period. All right. Now that was all about the three different forms of communication, like three different barriers that are there in the communication process. That was physical barriers, semantic barriers, and psychological barriers. Now, in any kind of organization, right, we find that there are different types of communication that takes place in an organization. The communication can be of different types. It can be verbal, it can be non-verbal. Now coming to what we call it as verbal communication. Verbal communication, it can again be oral communication, it can be written communication, or it can be visual communication. Orally, right now I am communicating to all of you. So this is the form of oral communication. Right now, all of you are being communicated to orally through this virtual medium, right? A session is being conducted based on the paper that you all have 182. So this is what is oral communication. Apart from these kind of interactions, face-to-face interactions or virtual interactions, there can be also few other different types of oral communication that could be in the form of meetings, that can be in the form of interviews, that could be in the form of telephonic conversation, that could be in the form of, say, Skype interviews or meetings over Skypes. Now these, it can be in the form of like video conferencing. These are the different oral forms of communication. Apart from that, there can be also, like, there are different forms of written communication also. Can you give me a few examples of written forms of communication? Yes. Can you give me a few forms of written communication? Yes. Few forms of written communication.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. So few forms of written communication can be communication through writing letters, formal letters or
Right.
informal letters,
Absolutely
or
correct.
writing an application, etc. Yeah.
It can be absolutely correct, Nikesh. It could be in the form of letter writings that involves both formal as well as informal. That can be in the form of emails. That can be in the form of messaging. That can be in the form of blogging. That can be in the form of report writing. That can be in the form of advertisements, proposals. There are innumerable. That can be in the form of notice, circular, memorandum. There are different forms of written communication that are used for official purposes. Right now, we are talking about the different forms of communication that we do come across while working for a particular organization, right? So it can be in oral form or it can be in written form. Apart from that, it can also be in visual form. Sometimes we get to see like different pictures, we get to see different types of, it might be in the form of pictures, it might be in the form of graphs, it can be in the form of charts, it can be in the form of diagrams. There can be different wide variety of visual forms of communication also, right? So all these are very commonly used forms that we do find in different kinds of organizations. Now, since we are talking about organizational communication, let me tell you, when we are talking about verbal communication, that is words either orally or in the written form, again we can further discriminate it under two different heads. One is what we call it as internal communication, the other is what is called as external communication. Internal is within the office itself, people communicating who are very much part of the organization, when they communicate with each other internally, that is what we call it as internal communication. Now, internal communication can again be of different forms. It can be vertical, it can be horizontal, it can be diagonal. Now, when I say vertical, it means it can be both upward as well as downward. Upward communication, When the subordinate communicates with that of his superior, that is what is called as upward communication. When the superior communicates with that of his subordinate, that is what is called as downward communication. When people belonging to the same rank, right, or same designation or same position, when they communicate with each other, that is what is called as horizontal or lateral communication. And apart from that, there is one more form of internal communication, that is what is called as diagonal communication. When two people, irrespective of rank or designation, when they communicate with each other, that is what is called as diagonal communication. Now, coming to what is called as upward as well as downward communication. Now, upward as well as downward communication can be used for different purposes. For example, if I work as a subordinate, I can be talking about my problems. I can be giving my feedback or my recommendations when my senior asks me or my boss asks me about it. I can communicate with him either in the oral form or in the written form. That is what is called as upward communication. Quite contrary to this, when the superior communicates with that of his subordinate, giving guidelines, giving instructions, asking for clarifications, asking for justifications, so that is what is called as downward communication. When the superior communicates with that of his subordinate, that is what is called as downward communication. When two people belong to the same rank, right, now upward as well as downward communication, it can both of them, it can be either in oral form or it can be written form. Now coming to horizontal communication, or what is called as lateral communication, it can take place between two people who are working at the same rank or designation. Say the finance manager communicates with the sales manager. Both of them, they work with the same designation, but could be quite possible they work for different departments. So that is what is called as horizontal or lateral communication, which is in most cases the horizontal or the lateral communication. In most cases, we find that it is more of oral communication rather than written communication. Okay, because it takes place between two people who belong to the same rank or designation. So that is what is called as horizontal communication or lateral communication. And diagonal communication takes place between people irrespective of position or rank. Say, suppose the managing director of the organization communicates with the security staff of the organization. So when irrespective of the rank, when the flow of communication takes place, that is what is called as diagonal communication. Now this is what is called as internal communication, internally within the members of the organization. Right? Now, communication can also be external, right? When a particular representative of the organization communicates with the externally, communicates with the external stakeholders of the organization, that is when communication is external. Say the manager of an organization communicates with the clients or the customers or the suppliers for the timely delivery of raw materials, or with the bankers for seeking loan, or with the, say, the media houses or the, say, the social media for the advertisement of their products, for the promotion of their products. So all these are forms of external communication. So communication in an organization, it can be either, it can be internal or it can be external. It can be either internal or external, but both ways it goes on. That is both internal communication as well as external communication. Both of them goes on parallelly in an organization. All right. Now moving on to the next topic. Now coming to what is called as non-verbal communication, let us move on to the next topic, that is what is called as non-verbal communication. Now, Non-verbal communication is the kind of communication when we do not require the help of any kind of, when we do not require the help of any kind of uh, say written or spoken words. That is when communication is what is called as non-verbal communication. We do not require the usage of any kind of oral or written words. We communicate through our body language, which comprises of our facial expressions, which comprises of our eye movements, which comprises of our gesture, posture, our tone of voice, our way of dressing up, right? The space and the distance which we choose to keep with people with whom we interact, right? All these come under. Other than that, we can also talk about the different kinds of artifacts or accessories that we do carry when we communicate with each other. Apart from that, it can be the usage of time, right? All these aspects come under what is called as non-verbal communication. Okay, now the first component of is a non-verbal communication collectively. It is termed as co-pact. That is what is called as non-verbal communication, which is collectively termed as co-pact, where K stands for kinesics. The first K stands for kinesics. Now, kinesics refers to the different types of facial expressions, to the different eye movements, to it refers to the gesture, not exactly eye movements, it refers to the gesture, it refers to the posture. Now, suppose, for example, you meet your friend after a very long period of time, and after meeting your friend for a very long, after a very long period of time, you say, I'm very pleased to meet you, with no smile on his face. So, whatever you say, that I'm very pleased to meet you, does not match with the expressions on your face, right? So, when you are speaking verbally, saying that I am very pleased to meet you, it does not match with your facial expressions. Now, 55% of the communication that we do on a regular basis, that takes place non-verbally rather than verbally. It takes place non-verbally rather than verbally. We, through our facial expressions, through our gesture, through our posture, we communicate a lot of things, right? We communicate a lot of things through our facial expressions. Say some like most of the times when a person said something, we also look at his or her facial expressions. What kind of facial expressions is being exhibited by him or her? Is it being positive? Is it being negative? Similarly, the gestures, okay, that is the movement of our hands, right? Nodding of heads, movement of our hands, all these come under what is called as gesture, which is also a part of non-verbal communication. Now, the way you are right now, all of you are at home, the way you are right now, maybe somebody is sitting, somebody is lying, the way in which you are maintaining your posture right now at home is not the kind of posture that you generally stick to or maintain whenever you are sitting in a face-to-face interaction, isn't it? The gesture or your posture, it ultimately it varies, it differs a lot, right? So the kind of posture you have when you are sitting for an interview is not the kind of posture which you have when you go out, when you're going out with your friends for a movie. You are sitting in a movie theater, the way in which you sit in a relaxed posture is not the same way you sit when you are sitting in front of your boss, isn't it? So our postures do also matter a lot. This is also what comes under our gestures, that is the way in which we move our hands, the nodding of our heads. All these, it is very important that whatever we speak, are words that should match with our gesture, with our posture. It should match. Other than that, our communication, if our whatever we are trying to say, like orally, if it does not match with our expressions, right, then there is a lot of gap between what we say and what we ultimately exhibit through our body language. There is a lot of gap in that, right? So which is easily visible to the person who is at the other end. He or she can definitely understand that whatever you are trying to say, it does not really match with the kind of facial expressions or with your gesture or with your posture. For example, in any kind of presentation that you're listening to, whenever somebody is giving some presentation, you are sitting right in front, very attentively listening to him or her taking down notes. The presenter knows, yes, you are a part of an audience who is listening very attentively. On the other hand, you are sitting there in a very relaxed kind of posture. You are not maintaining any kind of eye to eye contact with the person who is communicating, but you are looking here, you are looking there. It automatically, your body language shows the negative response that you have, and that is definitely understood by the speaker, right? Apart from that, eye expressions, we also do exhibit a lot of eye expressions, which is called as oculesics. Eye to eye contact, not maintaining an eye to eye contact, half closed eyes, like all these are different forms of eye expressions, which also definitely comes under what we call it as non-verbal communication. Apart from that, the tone of our voice, the tone which we use in order to communicate with others, is what is called as paralanguage. What you say, the content of your words is not that important, but what is important is the manner in which you speak. Now that is what is important. Okay, whether you are being rude, whether you are being polite, whether you are being sarcastic, right? All this comes under what is called as para language. Next is what is called as proximus. Now, proximus, it comes from the word proximity, which means closeness. Right. Now, it is not the same kind of intimacy that we have with all the people with whom we interact on a regular basis. Like family members at home, with them we maintain a very special kind of relationship. We are very close to them. So that kind of space is what we call it as intimate space. When you maintain altogether a different kinds of space with your, say, with your colleagues at your workplace, with your boss at your workplace. So that is what is called as personal space. Again, it is not the same kind of relationship that you do maintain with them, the kind of intimacy or closeness that you have with your parents, with your childhood friends, with your relatives, with your siblings at home, is not the same kind of relationship that you maintain with your colleagues or with your say boss at your office. That is what is called as personal space. The third type of space is what we call it as social space. Now, social space, it definitely, it covers, it under social space we have like people with whom we do not even interact on a regular basis. Our clients, our customers, our suppliers, our franchisees, dealers, stockists, retailers. With them, you do not communicate on a regular basis, but still you maintain some kind of relationship with them. That is what is called as social space. And the fourth type is what is called as public space. Now, what is this public space is all about here? Public space here, it refers to the kind of relationship which is built, like either it is not a relationship or even if the relationship is there, like hardly like any not any kind of bonding is formed. Political leaders, when they do give speech to people where there is a mass accumulation before the before the elections, when the political campaigns were being held, there was a lot of people, okay, who attended these political campaigns. So this kind of space between the political leader and the audience is what is called as public space. So there are four different kinds of space which comes under proximus, okay, under non-verbal communication. Apart from that, the kind of accessories that you do carry, like the kind of different kinds of outfits that you do put on, right, when you are dressed up for your party, is definitely not the same kind of outfit you are like putting on when you are going for an official meeting. So you don't have to speak, your attire itself speaks a lot about you, right? So all these is also covered under what is called, it comes under what we call it as artifacts, or the different kinds of accessories that you carry, maybe in the form of your car, in the form of your cell phone. Okay, it speaks a lot about you as a person, about your financial background, about your educational status, your body language. It speaks a lot about you. So all these aspects are covered under what is called as non-verbal communication, right? Apart from that, what we also have is the value that is we do attach to time. That is what is called as chronemics, right? That is the value attached to time. Like some of us, we are very particular about time. Some of us, we are not at all. Some of us, we are regularly, we are late for our work, and we come up invariably with some kind of new excuse. This shows that you do not have any kind of dedication towards your work. So that is what is called as chronemics or time language. You don't have to say that orally, okay, I'm not very dedicated, I am very dedicated, but it comes out through your attitude. So that is what is comes under what is called as chronemics. And the last one is what is called as the touch or haptics. Okay, sometimes when we, instead of communicating, we touch each other. For example, you are meeting your friend after a very long period of time, you hug him or her, right? You touch him or her. So, touch, it also like it has got a lot of meaning, whether the touch is really soft or somebody hits you, punches you. That is not very, of course, definitely not a very soft kind of body language, but that kind of body language is definitely very harsh. So all these aspects come under what is called as non-verbal communication, which is also termed as COPACT, where K stands for kinesics. I repeat myself once more, which stands for facial expressions, gesture, posture. O stands for oculesics, that is the eye movements. First, P stands for paralanguage, which refers to the tone of our voice, right? It is what we say is not very important, but how you say it, that is what is important. Next is what is called as proximus, which refers to the space and the distance that we choose to keep with others, which includes four different kinds of space: intimate space, personal space, social space, and public space. The next type is what is called as what we call it as the artifacts, that is the kind of accessories that you do carry along with yourself. That definitely also speaks a lot about you. That is what comes under artifacts. C comes C is what is called as chronemics or time language, and finally touch or haptics. Okay, so these are the different forms of what we call it as non-verbal communication. So these are the different forms of non-verbal communication. Now, what I think I have almost I've almost covered block one. Maybe a few. I guess. Are y'all having your course material with all of you? Most of you, at least. Yes? Content, you all have it with you? Yes? The content is with all of you?
Yes, ma'am, I have my content.
Okay. Now I am almost done with your module 1 or block 1. I have almost covered that except for a few basic things which just go through the few things. For example, these are the things which you all can go through: characteristics and conventions of conversations. These are very certain things which are very basics, which do not require much of explanation. Just go through the things. If you all find any kind of doubts, queries, whatever you all, anything that you all have, you all can definitely revert back to me in the next session that we do have it on next Saturday, again the same timings between 4 to 5. Now, for this, yes, for block 1, what you have in the second chapter, when you have the globalization of communication, it talks about that how right at the very beginning, what was the form of communication when there was no speech, no, there was no framing of message, but right at the very beginning, people used sign languages. People, did not, human beings, they never communicated with each other. They did not have any kind of urban lifestyle. Rather, they were like, they used to live in jungles, and they, how they used like the sign language, how they, since they did not frame sentences, so they used different kinds of signs in order to like communicate with each other. Okay, now what are the different signs and symbols that they used to paint whenever they wanted to express themselves? It was even during like days long back that we find that there are a number of cave paintings that are there. Like during that times, human beings, they resided in the caves, right? And then whenever they wanted to express their feelings, maybe they did not have any proper form of language, so they made sketches, drawings on the walls of the caves in order to express their feelings. Then slowly, with the gradual process of time, with the advancement of science and technology, so many technological advancements came up, and they gradually, when they learned the form of language, they learned that they had to speak properly in sentences. With the assimilation of words, proper sentences were being formed, and how they expressed themselves, they could express themselves, they could make themselves understood to the people who were at the other end. Okay, so please go through block 1. I am done with block 1, block 2, and block 3. Whatsoever the content is there, I shall discuss with all of you in the next class that we have in the upcoming Saturday session. Whatever I taught today, whatever discussions we had so far, do you all have any doubts, any confusion? Yes? Any doubts, any confusion? Have you all received already the topics for your assignments? Yes? Have you all received the topics for your assignments also?
Ma'am, I just wanted to do a query. So I already submitted my assignments in the last 18th of May. Okay, but then I did not
Okay.
get any receipt in return of the
Have you
submission. So
submitted
what
it
should
online? Have you submitted it
online through?
online?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Then
through Google
online
form.
you generally you do not get any kind of receipt. Generally, you will not get any
So
receipt.
how will I know
Receipt for
whether
that.
my
Did you have a talk with the where did you try to communicate with any representative from your regional center?
hello?
I said, did you try to communicate with anybody from the regional center?
No, the regional center is closed, and if you ring the regional center, no one picks up the call. So
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay, maybe I'll try to get some information and get back to you in the next class. Okay.
okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all of you.
Ma'am,
Thank
do
you,
you know
ma'am.
the exam date? Shit, she's gone. Okay, bye bye.